This video is sponsored by my day job. All views and opinions are my own. Likes and subs are appreciated, but don't hit the notification button. Does anybody actually even do that? Seems annoying. Don't do that. I've been meaning to play through Terminator Resistance for a couple years now. Even with the lower reviews, I kept seeing it for around $30 and finally decided to pull the trigger. Looking back on the critic scores, I have only one thing to say.
Talk to the hand.
Why do I think this is the best thing in the Terminator universe since Terminator 2? Well, let's get into it. Welcome back to JBG. Today we're taking a look at Terminator Resistance on the PS5 and its DLCs. The developer Teyon is pretty well known for the disaster of a game in Rambo, the video game. I'll just leave it to Angry Joe to sum up how that went.
You know what? The most accurate description for this game I could come up with is that it's those little disgusting pieces of corn left over in the diarrhea that Time Crisis 2 took after an all-night Taco Bell binge.
So obviously, even seeing quite a few YouTubers singing its praises as an underrated gem, I was still skeptical. The moment I let the intro music play out though, the guitar solo rendition of the Terminator theme played, you should have seen my face. I knew I was going to enjoy my time with this game. This game is not perfect by any means. It screams AA in its character models, animations, and voice acting. In fact, some of the voice acting bugged me so much by late game I was skipping through dialogue just to get back to the action. Though most of the voices in combat are actually pretty good, canned phrases get a bit repetitive. Initially, I was going to do something I normally don't like to do and go through story spoilers. The story is a big part of the reason I think this game is defended so religiously by fans.
Don't do that.
But I hate having stories spoiled for me no matter how old the game is. Though be warned, there are minor early game spoilers, minor story spoilers for the DLCs, and some game cap from late game, so this isn't going to be completely spoiler free, but I'm going to keep it to a minimum. I'm also not going to hit on most of the Easter eggs because some of them are really well done, and I don't want to spoil those for anybody either. At this point, I think we all know what a Terminator is.
I'm a cybernetic organism, living tissue over a metal endoskeleton.
This story puts you in a world 30 years after Judgment Day, and is basically a prequel depending on how you look at it. It aligns with the original two movies without stomping on any of the storylines, and is technically before the Model 101 or T-800 is sent back to kill Sarah Connor.
Sarah Connor?
Yes?
You're Jacob Rivers, a Resistance member that is the last survivor of your unit, trying to fight your way back to the Resistance. You end up hooking up with a group of survivors along the way, and they'll be the primary source of side quests throughout the game, but we'll get back to those in a few. As the story goes on, the survivors you meet at the beginning will tag along on your quest to reunite with the Resistance. Leaving it here to keep it vague, I'll just say I found myself actually invested in what's a pretty simple storyline, especially through the last couple levels. I did see the main plot twist coming about a mile away, but it didn't really ruin the endgame for me at all. I really like how they aligned it to the original stories without having to disrespect them to make them fit. It could have easily been the kind of story that would have given us the legitimate sequel to T2 that we all wanted but never ended up getting. But let's touch on the DLCs quick and then get to the game mechanics. So for the DLCs you have Infiltrator mode and Annihilation Line. In the PS5 Enhanced Edition, it automatically comes with Infiltrator mode, and Annihilation Line is an additional $15. Infiltrator mode is a short mini-campaign where you take the role of a Terminator in the same timeline of the main game. You're tasked on taking out a Resistance leader and have to collect bits of intel so you can track him down. This is a really cool alternative mode they included with the PS5 version. Playing as a T-800, you aren't going to try and be fast and stealthy in this mode, of course.
Of course, I'm a Terminator.
And the weapons vary a bit here from the main game, with throwbacks to the minigun and the single-shot 40 mic. It's a really simple mini-campaign, with a few side objectives that play out in a couple hours, without a save system. It's meant for a single sitting. They say it averages about 2 hours, but I accidentally finished my first run in about 30 minutes not paying attention. It's a lot closer to the 2 hours if you go through the whole thing though. But this was a really welcome addition to play after finishing the main campaign. After finishing the main game and Infiltrator mode, I wanted to play more, so I picked up the DLC for $15. I'm just going to say it here, I don't recommend the Annihilation Line DLC at all. Without spoiling too much, just in case you do want to pick it up, it throws in some Kyle Reese missions before he was sent back to protect Sarah Connor. I just found the story here to be absolute and nonsensical. It feels shoehorned in just to add a bit more fan service, but it doesn't fit with what I thought was a respectful main story. Another issue I had with it is that it's set right before the endgame of the campaign, but it's loaded separately without carrying any progression over. Since most people will wait to pick it up until after they figure out if they like the main campaign, it's really annoying to lose progress and start a separate additional storyline set in the same timeline, but still not even having an option to play through it organically through the story. Outside of a horribly cringe story for this that really didn't make any sense to me, I had some other issues with the amateurish writing with military dialogue. It might not bug most people, but anyone who served is going to cringe anytime hearing a sergeant call another sergeant sir repeatedly. I don't know, maybe that's a Space Force thing. I don't at all recommend spending $15 for what amounts to about 2 to 3 hours, with the horrible dialogue, the bad story placement, the bad mechanical placement, and a story that just feels amateur when compared to how respectful the main campaign was to the movies.
And I won't be back.
Enough about that, let's move on to the mechanics. I was actually impressed with how well they worked progression out here. It's very simple but extremely effective. Your first few missions, you only have traditional weapons. You're obviously tied a bit more to stealth in these sections, since any fan knows how effective a 9mm is going to be against a Terminator. You have a pretty basic stat tree that you fill in with skill points gained through leveling up, and you have 3 skill trees that fan out slightly. Combat is your ability to use certain weapons and explosives, and how stealthy you are. Survival is your defense level, carrying capacity, and the amount of experience earned. And science is your hacking, lockpicking, and crafting. The lockpicking is kind of a glitchy mirror of Bethesda's lockpick minigame, and the hacking is basically a simple game of Frogger. I didn't much care for how glitchy the lockpick system is here, but it was used pretty sparingly. I don't know why the Frogger hacking minigame was so satisfying to me, but neither of the minigames are too tough, and they don't pull you out of the game for too long. The experience I was getting trying to max out the level is why I was doing all the basic fetch quests side missions until late game. While the skills are still pretty basic, the intervals they level at is simple and meaningful progression. It follows parallel with how your arsenal advances through the story missions. I felt like it was balanced perfectly here to where you're going from hiding from T-800s to late game when you're taking them on by the dozens. I did mention I was skipping dialogue towards the end, and this is where I'm going to hit on some of the low-hanging fruit for issues the game still has. Most of the voice acting here varies from mediocre to downright atrocious, and the kid here is horrible.
Jacob? Are you awake?
How long have you been sitting there?
Not that long. I know that you're going to that hospital today, so I went on my first scavenging run.
The dialogue is half the problem anyway. It's just written sloppy. I'm not sure if it got worse as the game went on, or I just started getting too annoyed to listen anymore. That's where I started skipping dialogue to get to the next mission and the next combat section. The AI is another small problem, though not as bad as a lot of the reviewers made it out to be initially.
We're not gonna make it, are we? People, I mean.
The stealth sections where you're sneaking around, they were so hit or miss whether you could just run right past the T-800 or if they were going to engage immediately if you left cover. On occasion, the AI mapping was messed up too, but I saw more footage of this in reviews than I actually saw playing through and having to replay a few of the missions. Some people had issues with the actual AI of the Terminator, but I have to argue this is exactly how they would react. Terminators don't have a sense of self-preservation.
I'll be back.
What?
So it wouldn't have made any sense to program the AI for the Terminators to take cover and maneuver tactically outside of general flank movement. This may not be what a typical Call of Duty FPS type fan wants to hear, but we're here for a Terminator game, not another recycled Modern Warfare or World War II clone. There's also very occasional clipping issues I found with cover, but I mean very occasionally. The initial reviews said there were a ton of issues with hitting invisible walls through cover that I really didn't run into. Even on the section shooting through where your cover was blasted away, I only found a few issues here or there, and it almost always worked where I could still shoot through the new openings without any issues. This could be due to the PS5 Enhanced version, so I can only speak to what I saw. Something else I touch on real quick is for trophy hunters, since this is a pretty direct platinum. There is a glitch with the story progression trophies that I ran into, and the only thing I found trying to look it up was that it had something to do with leaving the game open when you put your PS5 into standby mode, but I can't really confirm what caused it. I only had to replay 2 late game missions that were actually 2 of my favorite ones in the campaign, so I didn't have much of an issue with it in the end. Trophies are almost all direct enough that you naturally get them through the game without needing a guide, with the exception of a specific locked door that you might have to go back and unlock. Again, this is easily done through level select of save files, so it's only a matter of minutes to do. This is definitely a game that I enjoyed getting the platinum on, and I would recommend it even as someone who isn't specifically a trophy hunter. Overall, I completely recommend this at the $30 I picked up the PS5 version for. There's a significant campaign length, and the Infiltrator mode included is a great couple-hour diversion from the main game, although I absolutely do not recommend the Annihilation Line DLC at all. I don't see the value being even close to half of the price of the main game, with such a ridiculous story and setting back the progress since they were too lazy to integrate it into the main game. But as far as I'm overall concerned, this is the Terminator 3 that everybody wanted and we didn't get. And I'm much more confident now in Teyon's upcoming RoboCop game that I've been looking forward to, knowing they redeemed themselves after such an atrocious Rambo game. I'm looking forward to seeing what they do with the RoboCop franchise next. Until next time.
I'll be back.
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 What? Toodaloo, motherfucker. Hey,